Greetings! Welcome to the Week 5 Early Access Update for Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades. We're going to start off as usual with a sound check. Make sure your speakers aren't up too high. Wonderful. Cool, so we got a whole bunch of new toys for you this week, where we're gonna start off with the new firearms, and then talk about new features and some adjustments I've made to existing features. So first off, you'll notice we have a whole Christmas tree worth of stuff here. We've got 4 new handguns to play with. Gonna start out. We've got a G22. This one is, if I remember, I believe this one is 40 Smith & Wesson. Absolutely wonderful to actually have a handgun with more than 10 rounds in it. Beautiful. You'll notice it's got glow sights. I actually put some glow sights onto the 1911 to make it a little easier to aim. Going down the line, I've got a suppressed M9. At the moment, the suppressor isn't removable because I actually need to make a full system for weapon attachments, but I initially put it on because I found a really, really great audio sample to adapt that sounded like an actually realistically suppressed handgun. So that sounds like this. Wonderful. We'll go up. There it goes. We've got a 45 P250 here. And of course, the delightfully dinky, but personally I think it looks great. Great with the metal there. 22LR Mark II. Yeah, feel free to play with all of those. You'll notice, especially because the grip angles are different on these, I have attempted to match the controller offset to the grip, which is actually a fairly wide range of angles. So as always, I'd love feedback on how those feel to you, and if any of them feel too awkward to reload based upon exactly where the magazine grab offset is for them. Wonderful. Now also, relating to handgun reloading, I know a number of you were not pleased with how sensitive it was, i.e. how quickly the magazine would sort of snap into the gun. I'm spawn locking the wrong mag there. There we go. Basically, I've walked it back. There still is a little jump at the end, which prevents some physics glitching, but you now actually have to get the magazine about half of the way in before it actually locks in, which if you're sort of lining it up and then doing it as a straight gesture, you can't even see the warp. Let me know if you find this to be a good compromise or not. And one final thing about the handguns that I almost forgot is that there's been a minor control change. Basically, initially, with, say, the prior ones, for releasing the slide, you could either hit the left side or the right side of the trackpad to release the slide. It's now just the left, and the reason for this is that for guns that actually have a safety, for handguns, right on the touchpad will now toggle that safety. So with this on, I can no longer move the slide back. In the case of the M9, there's the safety there. So, it's a minor detail. There's no risk of actually shooting anyone here. But figured it was, seeing as I finally did some handguns that had a safety on them, I figured I'd implement it. On to our next experiment for this week. This has been something that's been a bit of a popular request. Most of it polite, at least one case of it not being polite, so please don't do that. But basically, to have, right now, the way the two-hand aiming for the M4 works is that when you grab the foregrip, it basically just filters it and makes it easier to aim. Some of you have been requesting actually having the gun point towards the foregrip, so I've decided to enable this as an option. It's disabled on the weapon by default. You have to toggle it on, and you do so by grabbing the foregrip and then clicking the touchpad. That will change its mode to a free rotation. Its up vector is determined by the sort of primary hand and its pointing direction. is determined by the left controller. Now, I find this to be absolutely terrible to aim with. I've tried like 3 different filtering methods with it, both just sort of raw input. Right now it's being filtered, the sort of like the resultant vector between here and the foregrip is being filtered in a similar way to the hand position so it doesn't jitter when you're aiming really long range. And personally, I find this to be significantly worse. And the reason for this, as I'll try to demonstrate, is that when you're simply aiming with one hand, with this one just filtering, exactly one data point is responsible for the orientation. So you can sort of pull this hand up close to the chest, stabilize it, and then simply, that's classic mode here. It's fairly easy to hold directly on target. And this is true even with the iron sight. As you can see, we can line up and we can easily move the rifle to different positions while keeping the sort of front and the back of the sighting apparatus aligned. The moment that we make it so that it aims this way, you'll find as you're moving it around that because your 2 hands aren't actually linked by a physical object like a rifle, it becomes much harder to keep that alignment as you move from place to place. And while part of this is the filtering is necessary for long-range shooting. So at the moment, I find this to be a woefully inferior option, but I've left it in for you guys to all play with and tell me what you think of it. And then the last really minor experiment, this isn't for anything functional yet, but I just wanted to show it. Everything I've made thus far has been sort of, shall we say, sort of preset offset points, meaning I grab a handgun, it's always in the same place relative to the hand. And I realized that in my sort of rush to do that, I had never implemented a system for sort of arbitrarily grabbing objects at arbitrary rotations and being able to sort of exchange them between the hands. And I definitely think that there are certain handheld objects where this is going to be useful down the road. So yeah, I just have a little cube in here. It actually has the Mac 11's texture on it, but just found it fun to play with. If you want, if it's going to be sitting on this table, I'd love it if you could just like play with it with both hands and just see if it glitches out on you and if you end up grabbing it how you would expect to for an arbitrary interaction like that. Cool. Let's bop over to the modular range now. Wonderful. So over in the modular range here, I'm going to grab the M9 because I love it. Spawn lock it. You'll see that a number of things have changed in terms of the sequence selection and the scoreboard, which was there and is now over here. Basically, for each sequence, there is a top scores, a top players, so basically the top score for a given unique username, and a top local for you. The scores will show up basically for whatever sequence that you currently have selected. So if I hit 6 here, it will load them and pop them up there. In addition, the 4 sequences that were in before, which were my sort of first pass, those are out, and replacing them are 8 new sequences. There are 2 intro sequences at different ranges for handgun, and 2 for rifle. These are they're simple, they're just a simple progression of more targets in the same style that's there for you to just practice raw aim at something that isn't spawning or moving in an unusual manner. There's sequence 5 and 6, which are endurance style, so they're 20 waves, whole different variety of waves of targets coming at you. And then there are 2 sequences in what are called storm, which actually have moving targets. So give those a shot. I'm going to be adding some more sequences either in the next update or sooner. You'll just see them pop up here as they become available. You'll also notice this is just in one category called reflex. I've got 5 categories planned at the moment. And this is basically just going to be one of the things I'm working on in parallel with other aspects of the game over the next, coming weeks. So give it a shot and please knock my terrible scores off the scoreboard as fast as you are able. And then lastly, in terms of content changes, I want to mention that in the Grenade Skeeball scene, I have lowered the position of the sort of play field just a little bit after some testing we did this past week that found that people who are shorter than about 6 feet oftentimes are clipping the grenade along the top surface there. I'm going to make this adjustable probably by next week, but I wanted to do this for now just to see how people thought of the lower field and to make it a little more accessible to shorter folk. So hopefully that helps.
And now to jump out of VR for a moment, I just thought I'd also just do a little bit of bookkeeping in terms of a bunch of other little fixes and changes that are in this week's update. So I've got my list here. So let's see. So the first is that I know a number of you have been having trouble with your controller triggers, especially with the revolver, because of the way in which it requires the trigger to fully reset. So I've changed the threshold for that from 0.02 to 0.08. If it still isn't enough for those of you who are having trigger issues, please let me know on the Steam community or the Reddit thread immediately. Because I would find that a little worrisome that much of the range is gone. But I'll investigate other solutions to that problem if that remains an issue. Let's see here. All of the quick belt bugs that I knew about, some folks have posted some delightful GIFs of loading a magazine from the quick belt and then just clicking the eject button and magazines spawning like crazy. That should be gone, despite how hilarious it was. As well as the bug where quick belts could hold multiple copies of an object. That bug should be fixed as well. If it recurs, let me know immediately. The Mac 11 cycling reliability issue for people who are dropping frames because they're, say, recording gameplay should be fixed. I've made it as robust as possible. If you're really dropping a ton of frames, the gun just cycles so fast that it may still sort of failure to feed and the bolt may lock forward. So keep me updated. I also fixed the issue where it auto-fires when you pick it up and the safety's off. It requires the trigger to be released before it will fire after initial pickup. I fixed the front loading of the M79, so that should no longer happen to you folks. And then lastly, I did some big internal refactors for both the way that physical objects just work in general and the way my trigger layer system works. Just to improve general CPU performance. What this does mean is that this week I basically touched every single object in the whole game that is interactive, which means I may have missed setting a flag somewhere. So if any object or any interaction doesn't seem to work or is a sort of new errant behavior, please let me know and I can push out a hotfix right quick. So next week I'm going to be putting together a system for arbitrarily spawning weapons and ammunition types, finally, as I should have my event system to the point where I can actually do that. So hopefully the whole, oh, I wish this gun were in this scene issue will no longer be an issue after this coming week. So, well, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up and do my final bug fixing pass before I push an update build and upload this devlog. So hope you guys enjoy the new toys, and I'll see you next week.